Welcome to the Ex Terra Podcast. The Ex Terra mission is to explore and discuss the business of space and its effect on the national and global economy, as well as life on Earth. How does what happens in space affect your life every day? That's what we're exploring on the Ex Terra website, as well as on this podcast. My guest is Tom Cooke, CEO of Spacely.work, a company which helps match talent and companies with projects on an as-needed basis. It's gig work for the aerospace industry. And Tom, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, Tom.
Where did you get the idea for Spacely?
Yeah, it was a handful of things that kind of came together. I was in the military for 24 years in the Air Force. When I retired, I started consulting, and I was using my network for my opportunities. And as there was plenty of opportunities in the industry, I was trying to figure out how to capture those and scale, kind of what I had brought with expertise and skill sets to the industry. And when I thought about hiring 5 or 10 or even 100 people, I thought, well, I don't know if, I don't know if I can solely get after that with a company like that. And I had also about simultaneously read a book called Reimagining Work by Rob Biederman, who went to Harvard Business School and started a company called Catalant Technologies. And they had developed this marketplace for folks that had been at Bain, McKinsey, BCG, all the major consulting groups. And I was fascinated by the platform, the technology, the network that was being created. And it really compared, in my mind, to an open marketplace like Uber and Airbnb and Turo, but for talent. And so from that point, I just became really enthralled with the idea, started really researching it, which industries were using the open talent marketplace concept and how we could potentially adopt that concept for the aerospace industry.
So then what's your background in aerospace?
Yeah, so I was in the Air Force for 24 years, from 1993 to 2017. I did a lot of things. I was enlisted. I did presidential communications for Air Force One. So I had to understand some communications standards and protocols for that. Went to the Air Force Academy. I went to pilot training. So I had background in science and engineering by going to the academy. Left flying and got put into space and missile systems and very technical work, and became a program manager for 16 years of that career for brand new space systems. And so worked in all phenomenologies, GPS, infrared, radar, counter space communications in the RF spectrum. And so we worked across a lot of different systems and capabilities and developing new technologies and systems and deploying, operating, and sustaining them. So I had a lot of background in military space. And as I got out and started consulting, I was really excited to work with a lot of startups because we're seeing a real increase in commercial space companies and ones that are actually pursuing similar technologies and capability sets that we were working on in the military during my time in the Air Force.
Now, in this age of COVID, we've seen a lot of referred to sometimes as the Great Resignation. And there are also labor shortages, which is a real kind of dichotomy, that there are so many open positions, and yet there seems to be nobody who wants to take the jobs. Is a solution like Spacely.work a good way to address that issue?
We hope it's a way. We think that it's multifaceted in a strategic sourcing for talent. Certainly, we think that in the coming years, there's still going to be the traditional employment model that's out there, where you go through HR and legal and you become a badge-wearing company person. But as we saw, there was a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why people can't have traditional full-time employment, whether it's location-based, whether they have a sick family member they have to take care of and move back to a location where maybe that job doesn't physically reside. Maybe like me, I'm retired, and have an ability to pick and choose the projects and work that I do. And in other ways, organizations are also artificially limited in their capacity and their skill sets based on how many employees they can have. And so we hope that by having a marketplace, it can be a part of their overall sourcing strategy, which is having part employees and company people, having temp people that are temp for hire and going through the traditional hiring process, but also somebody that they may not have internal to the organization or have access to otherwise because of location or other reasons, like I mentioned. So having an ability to also tap into additional capacity, I think will hopefully start to get at the supply and demand mismatch that we're seeing in aerospace. Right now, we have over 16,000 open jobs in the aerospace industry. It's compelling work. It's good paying work. And yet there's 10 million unemployed Americans. So there's a mismatch there that we're trying to get after. And we believe that bringing in additional optionality, flexibility in how we work, all accelerated by the pandemic, will hopefully be able to show that there's people out there that are energized, enthusiastic, passionate about working in industry. And this hopefully will create an additional pathway for them to do so that wasn't existing in traditional employment models.
But does your research show that the talent pool matches the jobs that are available? Because as you said, it's highly technical work. And a lot of those people who may be out of work now have not had the kind of training that would be needed to work in the aerospace industry.
There's so many aspects to that question. I'll start with the first thing that is most important in our industry is the vocabulary. And that's really for any industry. And so if someone has the vocabulary, and we saw this during my time in the Air Force, we moved around very frequently. We were moving every 2 to 3 years in our assignments. But we had a shared vocabulary. And that's what we find is one of the most important things to have first and foremost in the industry is if you have a shared vocabulary and a shared understanding of some of the basic fundamentals, it's easier for you to get plugged into an internal team. But we also recognize that because technology is changing so quickly, it's not something to say that, well, this person has this specific skill, because that skill may not exist in 3 to 5 years. And so the ability to reskill, upskill, newly skilled people is going to be very important as technology continues to accelerate and we continue to adopt new technologies in aerospace. And so why we think those are important skill sets and it's important to focus on what types of skills we're building. We also want to create some type of common vernacular and vocabulary that makes it easy for folks to feel like they're part of the aerospace industry and community. And we start building a trust-based relationship with our marketplace and the people on it with these companies that we're trying to put projects on our marketplace with us.
And of course, the other aspect of technology is that this kind of technology that we're using to conduct this interview right now didn't exist 3 to 5 years ago or was not widely used. That makes remote work a much easier task to accomplish.
That's right. And what I've been advocating with the aerospace industry is you're seeing a collapsing of skill sets, meaning that a lot of different industries require someone like a data scientist. And if other industries are providing optionality and multiple pathways to get access to that intellectual and time capacity of that individual, that means if aerospace industry is not doing the same, they're going to lose out on opportunities to also compete for that same skill set, because we're now all competing for the same skills out there. And so if we don't have the ability to say we have similar pathways to work in our industry as other folks are doing and have been successfully doing for some time. Software industry is a great example, who's been doing this remotely for a long time. We're not going to be able to compete for the same types of talent because we don't have the same optionality. If we don't have the ability to do that, we're going to continue to see the supply and demand mismatch that we have currently of those 16,000 jobs, because we continue to see a lot more investment being poured into the aerospace and space economy. And so we're going to need people to work, right? If that money's coming in, we need to find people that are willing to work, and we need to be competitive in how we go out there and search for the folks that we want to work in our industry. We'll talk a little bit about NASA, I'm sure, in a bit, but what we want to highlight is the traditional employment model really locks down talent, and it's a binary decision. You're either an employee or you're not. You're either with Boeing or you're with Lockheed. We're trying to create more of a free market approach, that's been understandable by other industries, but aerospace, that's in a very highly competitive industry like aerospace, it's a newer idea that we want to share that talent and share that expertise across the board. The Space Force and NASA are looking at how to do that. If you're working on swarm technologies, as an example, and for NASA, for interplanetary missions, and the Air Force or Space Force is interested in that same type of concept and expertise, well, maybe that one person can share that expertise across NASA and Space Force simultaneously and how they work. And they're not necessarily a NASA employee or a Space Force employee, but they're easily shuffled back and forth through a more of an open market model.
Take us through the process, both for an employer with a job that they need to have filled and an employee or someone who is looking for work in the aerospace industry. When they come to Spacely.work, how does the process go for them?
Well, for both sides, it's a two-sided marketplace. So we have the software one side or the other first. And we decided to try to go out and see if there was folks that this idea and concept resonated with. And in the first week that we had people sign up, we had over 100 people sign up. I couldn't have hired 100 people in a week, right? So that gave us some market validation that this concept resonated. So we asked those folks to go out there and sign up for an account and put initial profile on, and they've done that. On the employer side, now we're saying, hey, if you have work to do, which we believe you have a lot of work to do since you have 16,000 open jobs, how do you look at that job and then try to deconstruct what work needs to be done for that job? Because you have a lot of job postings and job boards you can throw that job on, and those things are out there, Indeed and Monster and all that. But we need the employers to look at this a little bit more critically. And we're seeing the challenges in the traditional hiring process. They'll go out and they'll say, hey, we need this skill set and this combination of skill sets. And that person actually does not exist in the world, right? Because they're just putting, whatever keywords are out there they think that will trigger, these platforms to be able to provide them a candidate. What we need the employers to do is look at at work and deconstruct that job into work packages, projects, tasks. And we're looking at trying to encourage these employers to not only get off the work that needs to be done, but increase the velocity by doing these very short-term projects initially with people that they want to work with that haven't figured out how to work with them otherwise. And so we are trying to make it very easy for both sides to go onto the platform at Spacely.work, fill out initial basic information and the project that they want to put on the platform. And we've put program management software in the platform. So when there is a match, they can then go through the work together and have the collaborative tools, like you said before, that we have available to us, all kinds of forms these days to get work done together in a remote environment.
Who is your target audience, Tom? Are you targeting more startups? Are you looking more at established companies, in between, or is it pretty much open to everybody?
All of the above. What I really want Spacely to be able to do is get our collective arms around everyone that wants to work in aerospace. And when you think about even the folks that have already signed up for us, there's folks that want to work with Lockheed. There's folks that want to work with startups. There's folks that have all kinds of background that's going to be able to support either type of company. So we want to have, again, the optionality through the partnerships that we create that gives people the opportunity to work with who would they want to, right? We talk a lot about try before you buy. And this is for both sides, the employers and the talent. Aerospace is a small world, and I've talked to a lot of college graduates that are wanting to get into the aerospace industry, not exactly sure how to do that, but they also want to make sure that they're making a decision that doesn't limit them or harm them in the future, meaning that they're worried that if they come in and they think they're excited about working with Lockheed or Boeing, and a couple weeks go by or months go by or 18 months, which is the average for a millennial to stay in a work environment these days, that when they make that change, that's actually negative for them to make that change. So what we're saying is these projects can give those folks an opportunity to build a relationship before they make that employment decision and deepen a relationship. And likewise, on the employer side, there's a lot of challenges that go through the hiring process, the interviewing process, the HR process, the onboarding, and it takes a long time. And the employers are frustrated that it takes a while to get them onboarded just for the folks to leave shortly thereafter and that investment they've made. And our argument for that is, we agree, you've made that investment in that person. Why not retain an open channel to that investment? Account for the NDAs and the OCI issues. But if it's binary in your decision and how you deal with that individual, you've either lost that individual or you've gained them on the corporate worksheet. But if they decide to leave for whatever reason, they have to move back home or they want a different challenge. Well, now if it's binary, you can't access that investment and that talent you've invested in. So we're trying again to show on both sides of a two-sided marketplace that there's other ways that you can continue to use this technology intermediary to maintain and build these relationships with one another and create a broader community of folks that want to work in aerospace, but may not be able to do it full time. And another example I'll use real quickly is NASA in their contracting. said, hey, one of the examples they use is we wanted one of the best data scientists to work on one of our very hard problems. But one of the best data scientists worked for Morgan Stanley, and we couldn't convince that person to come work for NASA as a GS-11, and take a significant pay cut of, almost $400,000. But we would want that expertise, on demand if we could have access to it. And so that's one of the hypothesis we have is there's actually a lot of people out there that would love to work with aerospace, but they may not be willing to give up their current job, which may not even be in the aerospace industry. And as we continually to collapse these skill sets that are, needed across various industries, we're going to have more of an open model and not just a binary, you're in aerospace or you're not. We have to be able to open the aperture and get after the greater capacity of our country and, more globally as well for the global, partners that we've worked with in the aerospace industry as well.
Do you think that smaller companies are going to be more open to this kind of a scenario as opposed to a Boeing or a Lockheed that has years and years and years of corporate culture in place?
Yeah, we've had success on both sides, but I would say the startups and one of the challenges startups have are especially ones that are showing success through initial product market fit and fundraising is that scalability of their own company. Hey, we want to hire 30 people or 90 people or 120 people. These are some numbers I'm hearing from some of the companies, and they want to do it within the next year. And let's talk before we get to that success. The startups that aren't having that success, they're not able necessarily to bring on the payroll an astrophysicist or a geoplanetary scientist, but they need access to that expertise as they're growing before they can, before they get revenues that are enough to bring those folks on to the payroll. And so we're saying, well, if we want some of these startups to have success, we want to have them have access to this fractional type of capability. It's another reason why, a lot of startups don't, hang a shingle right off the bat and build up a huge office complex, because that's a capital expense that they just really can't afford early on. It's the same when you're talking about bringing on talent. If you hire 10 people, that's a huge expense right off the bat. So we're talking with the startup community and saying, there's a better way to get access to the expertise if we can account for the things that are concerning to you. But as you're trying to scale and grow, not only trying to hire all those people, but even if you're not at that point where you have the revenues to be able to support, that workforce, but you need that expertise to be able to grow your company, your idea, your concept, your product market fit. Here's another way to be able to get access to that.
We're talking with Tom Cooke, CEO of Spacely.work, which matches aerospace workers with projects on an as-needed basis. Take a moment right now to click on subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure you don't miss any of the podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Ex Terra, the Journal of Space Commerce. Tom, when did you establish Spacely?
Luckily, right before the pandemic in January of 2020. We put the company together in anticipation of a NASA RFP that was coming out. And we were made aware of it in November of 2019. As we understood what the request was going to be, we said, okay, this is an opportunity for us to maybe get some market validation for this concept. And so we had already had the idea for 2 years, actually, before formation of the company. Me and my co-founder, John Samuelson, we had another co-founder that actually had a successful exit with his platform. So he's a board advisor. We had another board advisor we had picked up as well, she is a global expert in marketplace ecosystems and talent platforms. And so we were really already structuring and pulling the team together, and we were waiting to see if this RFP would come out as kind of the impetus of putting the company together in direct response, to saying, hey, we want to have a formed company to be able to respond to this solicitation.
So then, what types of skill sets does Spacely represent?
All kinds, hard and soft skill sets. All right, we have all kinds of engineers that have already signed up: electrical, mechanical, aerospace. And why I wanted to highlight the soft skills as well is because in a remote environment, in a collaborative environment, you don't just have to rely on those things, right? You also have to rely on how do you communicate and collaborate. And we've built up within the platform a community feature, an ability for us to share knowledge across the platform, to collaborate and really build those relationships and build the trust within the platform. We really took those lessons from Airbnb. We were joking at the time of, when Airbnb first came out, what convinced us that we could go to somebody's house and we would survive the night and not be murdered in our sleep, right? There was some intrinsic trust that, we were developing, in all these platforms that are out there. I trust that if I go to this platform, this outcome will come out of it. So it's not just the hard skill sets that are important to us. It's also developing those soft skill sets to make sure that we can bring in folks in a non-disruptive way that want to work this way. And so they're more encouraged and they're going to be more passionate, enthusiastic about working in this way because they want to work. They're the ones that want to work in the industry. They just have whatever constraints against traditional full-time employment models that don't allow them to be a full-time employee. And so you'll see that the soft skill sets are just as important as the hard skill sets that we have with our tremendous members that have already signed up on the platform.
Spacely is one of 19 contractors that was selected for NASA's Open Innovation Services 2. What is that and why is it important?
Yeah, so NASA had this, and I love this. I kind of worked with NASA alongside on some of the projects with SpaceX out in LA when they were doing commercial launch for the first time. This was my first time to really see NASA up close and from a different perspective, from my own business. The recognition they had was we have a lot of smart people, we have a lot of tough problems, but we don't have a monopoly on either. And if we're going to solve some of these really hard problems, how do we engage citizen scientists and aspiring NASA people that maybe not think that they can work for NASA, but want to be involved in some way? And so their first iteration of the contract, Noise 1, was, to their terms, a resounding success and gave them an opportunity to go to a second iteration of the contract. The first phase of the contract was really crowdsourcing, crowd building, crowdsourcing challenges. And they really use that to go out to the crowd, a large, amount of people, and say, hey, we're thinking about this, right? This lunar rover. We're thinking about this, other tough problem. What would you do? What would you think? And they really were able to use these other platforms to come back and get new ideas external from the organization. So it brought in new, fresh ideas, other ways of doing business. And NASA was able to use those platforms and those marketplaces in a very cohesive way to help shape how they were going to get after some of those tough problems. When they decided to do Noise 2, they wanted to expand the effort beyond just crowd building and crowdsourcing and challenges into what they call micro purchases and micro tasks. They worked with Freelancer recently to see what they could get for $25. I thought that was a fascinating experiment. What can NASA get for $25, right? And so when we talk about micro purchase, micro tasks, I think of it as increasing velocity. So, okay, we're starting to show that some of this infrastructure works, these platforms, these models and concepts work. Now, how can you increase the velocity and your ROI on those and show that these models are part of your overall engagement structure and how you're engaging talent across not only your internal organization, but externally that are passionate about helping you solve some of these tough problems.
It's amazing to me to think that NASA can even bill $25. Somebody would look at it, isn't that missing a couple of zeros? I don't know.
Yeah, it's been great to see the types of challenges and projects and tasks that have come out through the contract we have with them. We're teamed up with three other companies on that, and we've had a great time responding to it. Each of those task orders as they come out to see, kind of what they're looking for. But it's true. It's really interesting to see this idea that we don't have to spend, $1 billion, for a rocket. SpaceX brought some of that thinking in, obviously, right? We significantly reduced the cost of launch. And now there's a whole bunch of launch companies, focused on dollars per kilogram or, the overall, periodicity of how quickly they can, replenish and get, launch rockets up. So we're now seeing an embracing of these concepts that have showed some initial return on investment and value. Now, how do we increase that so we can start to increase that ROI and that velocity of the technology adoption and bringing those ideas to bear? Some of our older listeners and viewers may recognize the name Spacely.
Can you tell us that story? Because you told it to me before, and I find it fascinating. I'd like you to share it.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I was a big Jetsons fan. When we started putting the idea for the company together, it was John, Aaron, and Tom. It was the three of us. And because I'd flown jets, and we thought, okay, we'll do jet. It's kind of aerospace. And Aaron's first name started with A, though. And we said we needed to change his name to start with an E so it would fit within jet. And so we kind of joked about that as we were, kind of thinking about, what the company would be. And then we said, okay, Jetsons is great. We'll do Jetsons. And as we really started to think about actually being a real company, we said, oh, that's going to get us in trouble, with, Warner Brothers or Hanna-Barbera, whoever it is, that, the Jetsons. But we wanted to bring that futuristic idea and new concept and model to place. So my co-founder, John, he was a big Jetsons fan too, and used Spacely sprockets. And, at the time, Calendly was just coming out, and everything, all the new tech companies were either .io or .ly. And so we said, that Spacely, that's got a ring, other things are coming out, and it's got some background for us, at least, the founders that were really excited about working in futuristic space activities. So that's how we ended up with Spacely.
We're going to close out here just in a moment, Tom, and I want you to. You've got the Spacely T-shirt on there.
Yeah,
my podcast listeners won't be able to see that, but on the video it'll be fine. Tom, look out over the next 10 to 15 years, rather, and tell me what you see coming in space commerce.
Yeah, I'm seeing some really fascinating concepts right now. Copernic Space, Grant Blaisdell, I just saw the announcement with Lunar Outpost. They're holding payload space, digital space for NFTs on the payload space. Lunar Outpost also, I think they had that famous, dollar contract with NASA, for bringing back, lunar soil. And so there is, this idea of, are we going to get to a commercial space economy, and what does that look like? And what does that mean? To me, other than space hotels and space tourism and some of these other things that are further out in my mind, the first thing is I'm starting to see a space economy actually start to be built. And what I mean by that is, we first had a land-based economy, and then a sea-based economy, and an air-based economy. And each of those have kind of the mechanisms and infrastructure put in place to make that commerce exist. And with the formation of the Space Force, folks were really kind of joking about that when Netflix was making fun of it or whatever. But I see that as just another iteration of the Navy protecting the global sea commons, and the Air Force protecting the air corridors, and the Army protecting the landmass, Corps of Engineers, down in New Orleans as an example, right? And protecting the ability to trade and produce, economic commerce. And so the fact is, in my opinion, is we're starting to see the infrastructure be put in place that will allow and enable economic commerce to exist freely and safely and securely, like we are in these other domains, but now in space. And so with that, who knows what will come out of it, right? We didn't know what types of commerce would be created by having ability to transit across air, land, and sea. And now the ability to potentially reduce those times significantly by going, on more of a ballistic trajectory, or, in an orbital, manner, there's going to open up a ton of opportunities. And as long as we maintain a safe and secure environment, like we try to do in the other corridors, we're going to see a rapid space economy develop by using that infrastructure and corridor that we're starting to put together now.
It's interesting you mentioned Grant, because he's been a guest on this podcast as well. Do you see, with what you're doing with Spacely, opportunities for companies to get more involved in cryptocurrency as a way to pay people and make those transactions go through the internet as opposed to sending a check? Yeah,
we, if we're, I was, obviously a fan of Elon and what he's doing, and they're talking about, okay, so say there's a society in Mars. Okay, well, there's no gold bullion, there's no fiat currency. What is that currency? So we actually are excited about what these folks are doing with cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we've been advancing those concepts in our company as well. We do have a currency, a digital currency, as part of Spacely. So as you sign up, you are able to attain digital currency, and there's all kinds of ideas, right? And these aren't new ideas necessarily. If you have an airline card, you build airline miles and you change that currency in for an airline ticket. But we want to show that we do believe that with Coinbase and crypto technology and blockchain, and we really believe that with smart assets and those types of things, we want to be involved in that and show that by your participation on a digital platform, we're thinking through those things and hopefully making it easier for you to work in a digital environment and a digital currency and digital market, because we believe that is, definitely a future we're going to see. It's so hard now these days. It's hard to even give cash away, right? You have cash, and pandemic caused some of that. You don't want to be changing hands in cash. But we're seeing more and more of a cashless society, and so a lot of these things are already being supported by digital transactions anyway.
Tom, we're going to have to leave it there. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me today.
Yeah, I thank you so much, and appreciate you hosting us today. And we're always happy to talk about Spacely with your folks out there at Ex Terra.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click on subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode of the podcast or any of our other videos. You can also get daily news at xterrajsc.com. One thing more, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at XTerraJSC. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for listening.